The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett. Chapter 15. Every Crackpot. Spade and Detective Sergeant Polhouse ate pickled pig's feet at one of Big John's tables at the State's Hof Brow. Polhouse, balancing pale bright jelly on a fork halfway between plate and mouth, said, "Hey, listen, Sam, forget about the other night. He was dead wrong, but you know anybody's liable to lose their head if you ride them that away." Spade looked thoughtfully at the police detective. "Was that what you wanted to see me about?" he asked. Polhouse nodded, put the forkful of jelly into his mouth, swallowed it, and qualified his nod. "Mostly." "Dundee send you?" Polhouse made a disgusted mouth. "You know he didn't. He's as bull-headed as you are." Spade smiled and shook his head. "No, he's not, Tom," he said. "He just thinks he is." Tom scowled and chopped at his pig's foot with a knife. "Ain't you ever going to grow up?" he grumbled. "What have you got to beef about? He didn't hurt you. You came out on top. What's the sense of making a grudge of it? You're just making a lot of grief for yourself." Spade placed his knife and fork carefully together on his plate and put his hands on the table beside his plate. His smile was faint and devoid of warmth. "With every bull in town working overtime trying to pile up grief for me a little more won't hurt. I won't even know it's there." Polhouse's ruddiness deepened. He said, "That's a swell thing to say to me." Spade picked up his knife and fork and began to eat. Polhouse ate. Presently Spade asked, "See the boat on fire in the bay? I saw the smoke. Be reasonable, Sam. Dundee was wrong and he knows it. Why don't you let it go at that? Think I ought to go around and tell him I hope my chin didn't hurt his fist?" Polhouse cut savagely into his pig's foot. Spade said, "Phil Archer been in with any more hot tips?" "Aw, hell, Dundee didn't think you shot Miles, but what else could he do except run the lead down? You'd have done the same thing in his place, and you know it." "Yes?" Malice glittered in Spade's eyes. "What made him think I didn't do it? What makes you think I didn't, or don't you?" Polhouse's ruddy face flushed again. He said, "Thursby shot Miles. You think he did? He did. That Webley was his, and the slug in Miles came out of it." "Sure?" Spade demanded. "Dead sure," the police detective replied. "We got hold of a kid a bellhop at Thursby's hotel that had seen it in his room just that morning. He noticed it particular because he'd never saw one just like it before. I never saw one. You say they don't make them anymore. It ain't likely there'd be another around, and anyway if that wasn't Thursby's what happened to his. And that's the gun the slug in Miles come out of." He started to put a piece of bread into his mouth, withdrew it and asked, "You say you've seen them before. Where was that at?" He put the bread into his mouth. "In England before the war." "Sure, there you are." Spade nodded and said, "Then that leaves Thursby the only one I killed." Polhouse squirmed in his chair and his face was red and shiny. "Christ's sake, ain't you never going to forget that?" he complained earnestly. "That's out. You know it as well as I do. You'd think you wasn't a dick yourself the way you bellyache over things. I suppose you don't never pull the same stuff on anybody that we pulled on you?" "You mean that you tried to pull on me?" "Tom just tried." Polhouse swore under his breath and attacked the remainder of his pig's foot. Spade said, "All right. You know it's out and I know it's out. What does Dundee know?" "He knows it's out." "What woke him up?" "Oh, Sam, he never really thought you'd—" Spade's smile checked Polhouse. He left the sentence incomplete and said, "We dug up a record on Thursby." "Yes? Who was he?" Polhouse's shrewd, small brown eyes studied Spade's face. Spade exclaimed irritably, "I wish to God I knew half as much about this business as you smart guys think I do." "I wish we all did," Polhouse grumbled. "Well, he was a St. Louis gunman, the first we hear of him. He was picked up a lot of times back there for this and that, but he belonged to the Egan mob, so nothing much was ever done about any of it. I don't know how come he left that shelter, but they got him once in New York for knocking over a row of Stuss games his twist turned him up, and he was in a year before Fallon got him sprung. A couple of years later he did a short hitch in Joliet for pistol-whipping another twist that had given him the needle, but after that he took up with Dixie Monahan and didn't have any trouble getting out whenever he happened to get in. That was when Dixie was almost as big a shot as Nick the Greek in Chicago gambling. This Thursby was Dixie's bodyguard, and he took the run out with him when Dixie got in wrong with the rest of the boys over some debts he couldn't or wouldn't pay off. That was a couple of years back, about the time the Newport Beach Boating Club was shut up. I don't know if Dixie had any part in that. Anyways, this is the first time him or Thursby's been seen since. "Dixie's been seen?" Spade asked. Polhouse shook his head. "No." His small eyes became sharp, prying. "Not unless you've seen him or know somebody's seen him." Spade lounged back in his chair and began to make a cigarette. "I haven't," he said mildly. "This is all new stuff to me." "I guess it is," Polhouse snorted. Spade grinned at him and asked, "Where'd you pick up all this news about Thursby?" "Some of it's on the records. The rest, well, we got it here and there. From Cairo, for instance." Now Spade's eyes held the prying gleam. Polhouse put down his coffee cup and shook his head. "Not a word of it. You poisoned that guy for us." Spade laughed. "You mean a couple of high-class sleuths like you and Dundee worked on that lily of the valley all night and couldn't crack him?" "What do you mean, all night?" Polhouse protested. "We worked on him for less than a couple of hours. We saw we wasn't getting nowhere, and let him go." Spade laughed again and looked at his watch. He caught John's eye and asked for the check. "I've got a date with the DA this afternoon," he told Polhouse while they waited for his change. "He sent for you?" "Yes." Polhouse pushed his chair back and stood up, a barrel-bellied tall man, solid and phlegmatic. "You won't be doing me any favor," he said, "by telling him I've talked to you like this." A lathy youth with salient ears ushered Spade into the district attorney's office. Spade went in smiling easily, saying easily, "Hello, Brian." District Attorney Brian stood up and held his hand out across his desk. He was a blond man of medium stature, perhaps 45 years old, with aggressive blue eyes behind black-ribboned nose glasses, the over-large mouth of an orator, and a wide dimpled chin. When he said, "How do you do, Spade?" his voice was resonant with latent power. They shook hands and sat down. The district attorney put his finger on one of the pearl buttons in a battery of 4 on his desk, said to the lathy youth who opened the door again, "Ask Mr. Thomas and Healy to come in," and then, rocking back in his chair, addressed Spade pleasantly. "You and the police haven't been hitting it off so well, have you?" Spade made a negligent gesture with the fingers of his right hand. "Nothing serious," he said lightly. "Dundee gets too enthusiastic." The door opened to admit 2 men. The one to whom Spade said, "Hello, Thomas," was a sunburned, stocky man of 30 in clothing and hair, of a kindred unruliness. He clapped Spade on the shoulder with a freckled hand, asked, "How's tricks?" and sat down beside him. The second man was younger and colorless. He took a seat a little apart from the others and balanced a stenographer's notebook on his knee, holding a green pencil over it. Spade glanced his way, chuckled, and asked Brian, "Anything I say will be used against me?" The district attorney smiled. "That always holds good." He took his glasses off, looked at them, and set them on his nose again. He looked through them at Spade and asked, "Who killed Thursby?" Spade said, "I don't know." Brian rubbed his black eyeglass ribbon between thumb and fingers and said knowingly, "Perhaps you don't, but you certainly could make an excellent guess." "Maybe, but I wouldn't." The district attorney raised his eyebrows. "I wouldn't," Spade repeated. He was serene. "My guess might be excellent or it might be crummy, but Mrs. Spade didn't raise any children dippy enough to make guesses in front of a district attorney and a stenographer. Why shouldn't you if you've nothing to conceal?" "Everybody," Spade responded mildly, "has something to conceal." "Everybody," Spade responded mildly, "has something to conceal. And you have?" "My guesses, for one thing." The district attorney looked down at his desk and then up at Spade. He settled his glasses more firmly on his nose. He said, "If you'd prefer not having the stenographer here, we can dismiss him. It was simply as a matter of convenience that I brought him in." "I don't mind him a damn bit," Spade replied. "I'm willing to have anything I say put down, and I'm willing to sign it." "We don't intend asking you to sign anything," Brian assured him. "I wish you wouldn't regard this as a formal inquiry at all, and please don't think I've any belief, much less confidence, in those theories the police seem to have formed." "No, not a particle." Spade sighed and crossed his legs. "I'm glad of that." He felt in his pockets for tobacco and papers. "What's your theory?" Brian leaned forward in his chair, and his eyes were hard and shiny as the lenses over them. "Tell me who Archer was shadowing Thursby for, and I'll tell you who killed Thursby." Spade's laugh was brief and scornful. "You're as wrong as Dundee," he said. "Don't misunderstand me, Spade," Brian said, knocking on the desk with his knuckles. "I don't say your client killed Thursby or had him killed, but I do say that, knowing who your client is or was, I'll mighty soon know who killed Thursby." Spade lighted his cigarette, removed it from his lips, emptied his lungs of smoke, and spoke as if puzzled. "I don't exactly get that." "You don't? Then suppose I put it this way. Where is Dixie Monaghan?" Spade's face retained its puzzled look. "Putting it that way doesn't help much," he said. "I still don't get it." The district attorney took his glasses off and shook them for emphasis. He said, "We know Thursby was Monaghan's bodyguard and went with him when Monaghan found it wise to vanish from Chicago. We know Monaghan welched on something like $200,000 worth of bets when he vanished. We don't know not yet who his creditors were." He put the glasses on again and smiled grimly. "But we all know what's likely to happen to a gambler who welches, and to his bodyguard, when his creditors find him. It's happened before." Spade ran his tongue over his lips and pulled his lips back over his teeth in an ugly grin. His eyes glittered under pulled-down brows. His reddening neck bulged over the rim of his collar. His voice was low and hoarse and passionate. "Well, what do you think? Did I kill him for his creditors, or just find him and let them do their own killing?" "No, no," the district attorney protested. "You misunderstand me." "I hope to Christ I do," Spade said. "He didn't mean that," Thomas said. "Then what did he mean?" Brian waved a hand. "I only mean that you might have been involved in it without knowing what it was. That could—" "I see," Spade sneered. "You don't think I'm naughty, you just think I'm dumb." "Nonsense," Brian insisted. "Suppose someone came to you and engaged you to find Monaghan, telling you they had reasons for thinking he was in the city. The someone might give you a completely false story any one of a dozen or more would do, or might say he was a debtor who had run away, without giving you any of the details. How could you tell what was behind it? How would you know it wasn't an ordinary piece of detective work? And under those circumstances you certainly couldn't be held responsible for your part in it unless—" His voice sank to a more impressive key, and his words came out spaced and distinct. "You made yourself an accomplice by concealing your knowledge of the murderer's identity or information that would lead to his apprehension." Anger was leaving Spade's face. No anger remained in his voice when he asked, "That's what you meant?" "Precisely." "All right. Then there's no hard feelings. But you're wrong. Prove it." Spade shook his head. "I can't prove it to you now. I can tell you." "Then tell me." "Nobody ever hired me to do anything about Dixie Monaghan." Brian and Thomas exchanged glances. Brian's eyes came back to Spade and he said, "But by your own admission, somebody did hire you to do something about his bodyguard Thursby." "Yes, about his ex-bodyguard Thursby." "Ex?" "Yes, ex. You know that Thursby was no longer associated with Monaghan. You know that positively?" Spade stretched out his hand and dropped the stub of his cigarette into an ashtray on the desk. He spoke carelessly. "I don't know anything positively except that my client wasn't interested in Monaghan. Had never been interested in Monaghan. I heard that Thursby took Monaghan out to the Orient and lost him." Again the district attorney and his assistant exchanged glances. Thomas, in a tone whose matter-of-factness did not quite hide excitement, said, "That opens another angle. Monaghan's friends could have knocked Thursby off for ditching Monaghan." "Dead gamblers don't have any friends," Spade said. "It opens up two new lines," Brian said. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling for several seconds, then sat upright quickly. His orator's face was alight. "It narrows down to three things. Number 1, Thursby was killed by the gamblers Monaghan had Welsh on in Chicago. Not knowing Thursby had sloughed Monaghan or not believing it, they killed him because he had been Monaghan's associate, or to get him out of the way so they could get to Monaghan, or because he had refused to lead them to Monaghan. Number 2, he was killed by friends of Monaghan. Or number 3, he sold Monaghan out to his enemies and then fell out with them and they killed him. Or number 4, Spade suggested with a cheerful smile. He died of old age. You folks aren't serious, are you? The two men stared at Spade, but neither of them spoke. Spade turned his smile from one to the other of them and shook his head in mock pity. "You've got Arnold Rothstein on the brain," he said. Brian smacked the back of his left hand down into the palm of his right. "In one of those 3 categories lies the solution." The power in his voice was no longer latent. His right hand, a fist except for protruding forefinger, went up and then down to stop with a jerk when the finger was leveled at Spade's chest. "And you can give us the information that will enable us to determine the category." Spade said, "Yes," very lazily. His face was somber. He touched his lower lip with a finger, looked at the finger, and then scratched the back of his neck with it. Little irritable lines had appeared in his forehead. He blew his breath out heavily through his nose, and his voice was an ill-humored growl. "You wouldn't want the kind of information I could give you, Brian. You couldn't use it. It'd poop this gambler's revenge scenario for you." Brian sat up straight and squared his shoulders. His voice was stern without blustering. "You are not the judge of that. Right or wrong, I am nonetheless the district attorney." Spade's lifted lip showed his eye teeth. "I thought this was an informal talk." "I am a sworn officer of the law 24 hours a day," Brian said, "and neither formality nor informality justifies your withholding from me evidence of crime, except, of course." He nodded meaningly. "On certain constitutional grounds." "You mean if it might incriminate me?" Spade asked. His voice was placid, almost amused, but his face was not. "Well, I've got better grounds than that, or grounds that suit me better. My clients are entitled to a decent amount of secrecy. Maybe I can be made to talk to a grand jury or even a coroner's jury, but I haven't been called before either yet, and it's a cinch I'm not going to advertise my client's business until I have to. Then again, you and the police have both accused me of being mixed up in the other night's murders. I've had trouble with both of you before. As far as I can see, my best chance of clearing myself of the trouble you're trying to make for me is by bringing in the murderers all tied up. And my only chance of ever catching them and tying them up and bringing them in is by keeping away every crackpot 181 from you and the police, because neither of you show any signs of knowing what in hell it's all about." He rose and turned his head over his shoulder to address the stenographer. "Getting this all right, son? Or am I going too fast for you?" The stenographer looked at him with startled eyes and replied, "No, sir. I'm getting it all right." "Good work," Spade said and turned to Brian again. "Now if you want to go to the board and tell them I'm obstructing justice and ask them to revoke my license, hop to it. You've tried it before and it didn't get you anything but a good laugh all around." He picked up his hat. Brian began. "But look here," Spade said, "and I don't want any more of these informal talks. I've got nothing to tell you or the police, and I'm goddamn tired of being called things by every crackpot on the city payroll. If you want to see me, pinch me or subpoena me or something, and I'll come down with my lawyer." He put his hat on his head, said, "See you at the inquest, maybe," and stalked out. Chapter 16. The Third Murder. Spade went into the Hotel Sutter and telephoned the Alexandria. Gutman was not in. No member of Gutman's party was in. Spade telephoned the Belvedere. Cairo was not in, had not been in that day. Spade went to his office. A swart, greasy man in notable clothes was waiting in the outer room. Effie Perrine, indicating the swart man, said, "This gentleman wishes to see you, Mr. Spade." Spade smiled and bowed and opened the inner door. "Come in." Before following the man in, Spade asked Effie Perrine, "Any news on that other matter?" "No, sir." The swart man was the proprietor of a moving picture theatre in Market Street. He suspected one of his cashiers and a doorman of colluding to defraud him. Spade hurried him through the story, promised to take care of it, asked for and received $50, and got rid of him in less than half an hour. When the corridor door had closed behind the showman, Effie Perrine came into the inner office. Her sunburned face was worried and questioning. "You haven't found her yet?" she asked. He shook his head and went on stroking his bruised temple lightly in circles with his fingertips. "How is it?" she asked. "All right, but I've got plenty of headache." She went around behind him, put his hand down and stroked his temple with her slender fingers. He leaned back until the back of his head over the chair top rested against her breast. He said, "You're an angel." She bent her head forward over his and looked down into his face. "You've got to find her, Sam. It's more than a day and she—" He stirred and impatiently interrupted her. "I haven't got to do anything, but if you'll let me rest this damned head a minute or two, I'll go out and find her." She mumbled, "Poor head," and stroked it in silence a while. Then she asked, "You know where she is? Have you any idea?" The telephone bell rang. Spade picked up the telephone and said, "Hello." "Yes, Sid, it came out all right, thanks." "No." "Sure. He got snotty, but so did I. He's nursing a gambler's war pipe dream. Well, we didn't kiss when we parted. I declared my weight and walked out on him. That's something for you to worry about." "Right. Bye." He put the telephone down and leaned back in his chair again. Effie Perrine came from behind him and stood at his side. She demanded, "Do you think you know where she is, Sam?" "I know where she went," he replied in a grudging tone. "Where?" She was excited. "Down to the boat you saw burning." Her eyes opened until their brown was surrounded by white. "You went down there?" It was not a question. "I did not," Spade said. "Sam," she cried angrily, "she may be—" "She went down there," he said in a surly voice. "She wasn't taken. She went down there instead of to your house when she learned the boat was in." "Well, what the hell? Am I supposed to run around after my clients begging them to let me help them?" "But Sam, when I told you the boat was on fire—" "That was at noon, and I had a date with Polhouse and another with Brian." She glared at him between tightened lids. "Sam Spade," she said, "you're the most contemptible man God ever made when you want to be. Because she did something without confiding in you, you'd sit here and do nothing when you know she's in danger, when you know she might be—" Spade's face flushed. He said stubbornly, "She's pretty capable of taking care of herself, and she knows where to come for help when she thinks she needs it, and when it suits her." "That's spite," the girl cried. "And that's all it is. You're sore because she did something on her own hook, without telling you. Why shouldn't she? You're not so damned honest, and you haven't been so much on the level with her that she should trust you completely." Spade said, "That's enough of that." His tone brought a brief uneasy glint into her hot eyes, but she tossed her head and the glint vanished. Her mouth was drawn taut and small. She said, "If you don't go down there this very minute, Sam, I will, and I'll take the police down there." Her voice trembled, broke and was thin and wailing. "Oh, Sam, go!" He stood up, cursing her. Then he said, "Christ, it'll be easier on my head than sitting here listening to you squawk." He looked at his watch. "You might as well lock up and go home." She said, "I won't. I'm going to wait right here till you come back." He said, "Do as you damned please," put his hat on, flinched, took it off, and went out carrying it in his hand. An hour and a half later, at 20 minutes past 5, Spade returned. He was cheerful. He came in asking, "What makes you so hard to get along with, sweetheart?" "Me?" "Yes, you." He put a finger on the tip of Effie Perrine's nose and flattened it. He put his hands under her elbows, lifted her straight up, and kissed her chin. He set her down on the floor again and asked, "Anything doing while I was gone?" "Luke, what's his name, at the Belvedere called up to tell you Cairo has returned. That was about half an hour ago." Spade snapped his mouth shut, turned with a long step, and started for the door. "Did you find her?" the girl called. "Tell you about it when I'm back," he replied without pausing and hurried out. A taxicab brought Spade to the Belvedere within 10 minutes of his departure from his office. He found Luke in the lobby. The hotel detective came grinning and shaking his head to meet Spade. 15 minutes late," he said. Your bird has fluttered." Spade cursed his luck. "Checked out, gone bag and baggage," Luke said. He took a battered memorandum book from a vest pocket, licked his thumb, thumbed pages, and held the book out open to Spade. "There's the number of the taxi that hauled him. I got that much for you." "Thanks." Spade copied the number on the back of an envelope. "Any forwarding address?" "No. He just come in carrying a big suitcase and went upstairs and packed, and come down with his stuff and paid his bill and got a taxi and went without anybody being able to hear what he told the driver." "How about his trunk?" Luke's lower lip sagged. "By God," he said, "I forgot that. Come on." They went up to Cairo's room. The trunk was there. It was closed but not locked. They raised the lid. The trunk was empty. Luke said, "What do you know about that?" Spade did not say anything. Spade went back to his office. Effie Perrine looked up at him, inquisitively. "Missed him," Spade grumbled and passed into his private room. She followed him in. He sat in his chair and began to roll a cigarette. She sat on the desk in front of him and put her toes on a corner of his chair seat. "What about Miss O'Shaughnessy?" she demanded. "I missed her too," he replied, "but she had been there." "On the La Paloma?" "The La is a lousy combination," he said. "Stop it. Be nice, Sam, tell me." He set fire to his cigarette, pocketed his lighter, patted her shins and said, "Yes, La Paloma. She got down there at a little after noon yesterday." He pulled his brows down. "That means she went straight there after leaving the cab at the ferry building. It's only a few piers away. The captain wasn't aboard. His name's Jacoby, and she asked for him by name. He was uptown on business. That would mean he didn't expect her, or not at that time anyway. She waited there till he came back at 4 o'clock. They spent the time from then till mealtime in his cabin, and she ate with him. He inhaled and exhaled smoke, turned his head aside to spit a yellow tobacco flake off his lip, and went on. After the meal, Captain Jacoby had 3 more visitors. One of them was Gutman, and one was Cairo, and one was the kid who delivered Gutman's message to you yesterday. Those 3 came together while Bridget was there, and the 5 of them did a lot of talking in the captain's cabin. It's hard to get anything out of the crew, but they had a row, and somewhere around 11 o'clock that night a gun went off there, in the captain's cabin. The watchman beat it down there, but the captain met him outside and told him everything was all right. There's a fresh bullet hole in one corner of the cabin, up high enough to make it likely that the bullet didn't go through anybody to get there. As far as I could learn, there was only the one shot. But as far as I could learn wasn't very far. He scowled and inhaled smoke again. Well, they left around midnight, the captain and his 4 visitors all together, and all of them seemed to have been walking all right. I got that from the watchman. I haven't been able to get hold of the custom house men who were on duty there then. That's all of it. The captain hasn't been back since. He didn't keep a date he had this noon with some shipping agents, and they haven't found him to tell him about the fire. "And the fire?" she asked. Spade shrugged. "I don't know. It was discovered in the hold, aft in the rear basement late this morning. The chances are it got started sometime yesterday. They got it out all right, though it did damage enough. Nobody liked to talk about it much while the captain's away. It's the corridor door opened." Spade shut his mouth. Effie Perrine jumped down from the desk, but a man opened the connecting door before she could reach it. "Where's Spade?" the man asked. His voice brought Spade up erect and alert in his chair. It was a voice harsh and rasping with agony, and with the strain of keeping 2 words from being smothered by the liquid bubbling that ran under and behind them. Effie Perrine, frightened, stepped out of the man's way. He stood in the doorway with his soft hat crushed between his head and the top of the doorframe. He was nearly 7 feet tall. A black overcoat cut long and straight and like a sheath, buttoned from throat to knees, exaggerated his leanness. His shoulders stuck out, high, thin, angular. His bony face, weather-coarsened, age-lined, was the color of wet sand, and was wet with sweat on cheeks and chin. His eyes were dark and bloodshot and mad above lower lids that hung down to show pink inner membrane. Held tight against the left side of his chest by a black-sleeved arm that ended in a yellowish claw was a brown paper-wrapped parcel, bound with thin rope and ellipsoid somewhat larger than an American football. The tall man stood in the doorway, and there was nothing to show that he saw Spade. He said, You know. And then the liquid bubbling came up in his throat and submerged whatever else he said. He put his other hand over the hand that held the ellipsoid. Holding himself stiffly straight, not putting his hands out to break his fall, he fell forward as a tree falls. Spade, wooden-faced and nimble, sprang from his chair and caught the falling man. When Spade caught him, the man's mouth opened and a little blood spurted out, and the brown-wrapped parcel dropped from the man's hands and rolled across the floor until a foot of the desk stopped it. Then the man's knees bent, and he bent at the waist, and his thin body became limber inside the sheath-like overcoat, sagging in Spade's arms so that Spade could not hold it up from the floor. Spade lowered the man carefully until he lay on the floor on his left side. The man's eyes dark and bloodshot, but not now mad, were wide open and still. His mouth was open as when blood had spurted from it, but no more blood came from it, and all his long body was as still as the floor it lay on. Spade said, "Lock the door," while Effie Perrine, her teeth chattering, fumbled with the corridor door's lock. Spade knelt beside the thin man, turned him over on his back, and ran a hand down inside his overcoat. When he withdrew the hand, presently it came out smeared with blood. The sight of his bloody hand brought not the least nor briefest of changes to Spade's face. Holding that hand up where it would touch nothing, he took his lighter out of his pocket with his other hand. He snapped on the flame and held the flame close to first one and then the other of the thin man's eyes. The eyelids, balls, irises, and pupils remained frozen, immobile. Spade extinguished the flame and returned the lighter to his pocket. He moved on his knees around to the dead man's side and, using his one clean hand, unbuttoned and opened the tubular overcoat. The inside of the overcoat was wet with blood and the double-breasted blue jacket beneath it was sodden. The jacket's lapels, where they crossed over the man's chest, and both sides of his coat immediately below that point, were pierced by soggy, ragged holes. Spade rose and went to the washbowl in the outer office. Effie Perrine, wan and trembling, and holding herself upright by means of a hand on the corridor door's knob and her back against its glass, whispered, Is he—" "Yes, shot through the chest, maybe half a dozen times." Spade began to wash his hands. "Oughtn't we—" she began, but he cut her short. "It's too late for a doctor now, and I've got to think before we do anything." He finished washing his hands and began to rinse the bowl. He couldn't have come far with those in him. Why in hell couldn't he have stood up long enough to say something? He frowned at the girl, rinsed his hands again, and picked up a towel. "Pull yourself together, for Christ's sake, don't get sick on me now." He threw the towel down and ran fingers through his hair. "We'll have a look at that bundle." He went into the inner office again, stepped over the dead man's legs, and picked up the brown paper-wrapped parcel. When he felt its weight, his eyes glowed. He put it on his desk, turning it over so that the knotted part of the rope was uppermost. The knot was hard and tight. He took out his pocket-knife and cut the rope. The girl had left the door and, edging around the dead man with her face turned away, had come to Spade's side. As she stood there, hands on a corner of the desk, watching him pull the rope loose and push aside brown paper, excitement began to supplant nausea in her face. "Do you think it is?" she whispered. "We'll soon know," Spade said, his big fingers busy with the inner husk of coarse grey paper, 3 sheets thick, that the brown paper's removal had revealed. His face was hard and dull. His eyes were shining. When he had put the grey paper out of the way, he had an egg-shaped mass of pale excelsior wadded tight. His fingers tore the wad apart, and then he had the foot-high figure of a bird, black as coal and shiny where its polish was not dulled by wood dust and fragments of excelsior. Spade laughed. He put a hand down on the bird. His widespread fingers had ownership in their curving. He put his other arm around Effie Perrine and crushed her body against his. "We've got the damn thing, Angel," he said. "Ouch," she said. "You're hurting me." He took his arm away from her, picked the black bird up in both hands and shook it to dislodge clinging excelsior. Then he stepped back, holding it up in front of him, and blew dust off it, regarding it triumphantly. Effie Perrine made a horrified face and screamed, pointing at his feet. He looked down at his feet. His last backward step had brought his left heel into contact with the dead man's hand, pinching a 1/4 inch of flesh at a side of the palm between heel and floor. Spade jerked his foot away from the hand. The telephone bell rang. He nodded at the girl. She turned to the desk and put the receiver to her ear. She said, "Hello? Yes. Who? Oh, yes. Who? Oh, yes." Her eyes became large. "Yes. Yes. Hold the line." Her mouth suddenly stretched wide and fearful. She cried, "Hello! Hello! Hello!" She rattled the prong up and down and cried, "Hello!" twice. Then she sobbed and spun around to face Spade, who was close beside her by now. "It was Miss O'Shaughnessy," she said wildly. "She wants you. She's at the Alexandria in danger." Her voice was, "Oh, it was awful, Sam. And something happened to her before she could finish. Go help her, Sam." Spade put the Falcon down on the desk and scowled gloomily. "I've got to take care of this fellow first," he said, pointing his thumb at the thin corpse on the floor. She beat his chest with her fists, crying, "No, no, you've got to go to her. Don't you see, Sam? He had the thing that was hers, and he came to you with it. Don't you see? He was helping her, and they killed him, and now she's— Oh, you've got to go." "All right." Spade pushed her away and bent over his desk, putting the black bird back into its nest of excelsior, bending the paper around it, working rapidly, making a larger and clumsy package. "As soon as I've gone, phone the police. Tell them how it happened, but don't drag any names in. You don't know. I got the phone call and I told you I had to go out, but I didn't say where." He cursed the rope for being tangled, yanked it into straightness, and began to bind the package. "Forget this thing. Tell it as it happened, but forget he had a bundle." He chewed his lower lip. "Unless they pin you down. If they seem to know about it, you'll have to admit it. But that's not likely. If they do, then I took the bundle away with me, unopened." He finished tying the knot and straightened up with the parcel under his left arm. "Get it straight, now. Everything happened the way it did happen, but without this dingus unless they already know about it. Don't deny it, just don't mention it. And I got the phone call, not you. And you don't know anything about anybody else having any connection with this fellow. You don't know anything about him, and you can't talk about my business until you see me. Got it?" "Yes, Sam. Who do you know who he is?" He grinned wolfishly. "Aunt Dan," he said. "But I'd guess he was Captain Jacoby, master of La Paloma." He picked up his hat and put it on. He looked thoughtfully at the dead man and then around the room. "Hurry, Sam," the girl begged. "Sure," he said absent-mindedly. "I'll hurry. Might not hurt to get those few scraps of excelsior off the floor before the police come. And maybe you ought to try to get hold of Sid." "No," he rubbed his chin. "We'll leave him out of it a while. It'll look better. I'd keep the door locked till they come." He took his hand from his chin and rubbed her cheek. "You're a damned good man, sister," he said, and went out. Chapter 17. Saturday night. Carrying the parcel lightly under his arm, walking briskly, with only the ceaseless shifting of his eyes to denote wariness, Spade went, partly by way of an alley and a narrow court, from his office building to Kearney and Post Streets, where he hailed a passing taxicab. The taxicab carried him to the Pickwick stage terminal in 5th Street. He checked the bird at the parcel room there, put the check into a stamped envelope, wrote M.F. Holland and a San Francisco post office box number on the envelope, sealed it, and dropped it into a mailbox. From the stage terminal another taxicab carried him to the Alexandria Hotel. Spade went up to Suite 12C and knocked on the door. The door was opened when he had knocked a second time by a small, fair-haired girl in a shimmering yellow dressing gown, a small girl whose face was white and dim and who clung desperately to the inner doorknob with both hands and gasped. "Mr. Spade?" Spade said, "Yes," and caught her as she swayed. Her body arched back over his arm and her head dropped straight back so that her short, fair hair hung down her scalp and her slender throat was a firm curve from chin to chest. Spade slid his supporting arm higher up her back and bent to get his other arm under her knees, but she stirred then, resisting, and between parted lips that barely moved blurred words came, "No! Mommy! Wah!" Spade made her walk. kicked the door shut, and he walked her up and down the green-carpeted room from wall to wall. One of his arms around her small body, that hand under her armpit, his other hand gripping her other arm, held her erect when she stumbled, checked her swaying, kept urging her forward, but made her tottering legs bear all her weight they could bear. They walked across and across the floor, the girl falteringly with incoordinate steps, Spade surely on the balls of his feet with balance unaffected by her staggering. Her face was chalk white and eyeless, his sullen with eyes hardened to watch everywhere at once. He talked to her monotonously. That's the stuff. Left, right, right. That's the stuff. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, now we turn. He shook her as they turned from the wall. Now back again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold your head up. That's the stuff. Good girl. Left, right. Now we turn again. He shook her again. That's the girl. Walk, 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 walk. He shook her more roughly and increased their pace. That's the trick. Left, right. We're in a hurry. 1, 2, 3. She shuddered and swallowed audibly. Spade began to chafe her arm and sighed, and he put his mouth nearer her ear. That's fine. You're doing fine. 1, 2, 3, 4. Faster. That's it. Step. Pick them up and lay them down. That's the stuff. Now we turn. Left, right. What did they do, dope you? The same stuff they gave me? Her eyelids twitched up then for an instant over dulled golden-brown eyes, and she managed to say all of yes, except the final consonant. They walked the floor, the girl almost trotting now to keep up with Spade, Spade slapping and kneading her flesh through yellow silk with both hands, talking while his eyes remained hard and aloof and watchful. Left, right, turn. That's the girl. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep the chin up. That's the stuff. 1, 2. Her lids lifted again a bare fraction of an inch, and under them her eyes moved weakly from side to side. That's fine, he said in a crisp voice, dropping his monotone. Keep them open. Open them wide. He shook her. She moaned in protest, but her lids went farther up, though her eyes were without inner light. He raised his hand and slapped her cheek 6 times in quick succession. She moaned again and tried to break away from him. His arm held her and swept her along beside him from wall to wall. Keep walking, he ordered in a harsh voice, and then, Who are you? Her rear gutman was thick but intelligible. The daughter? Yes. Now she was no farther from the final consonant than she. Where's Bridget? She twisted convulsively around in his arms and caught at one of his hands with both of hers. He pulled his hand away quickly and looked at it. Across its back was a thin red scratch 1.5 inches or more in length. What the hell? He growled and examined her hands. Her left hand was empty. In her right hand, when he forced it open, lay a 3-inch jade-headed steel bouquet pin. What the hell? He growled again, and held the pin up in front of her eyes. When she saw the pin, she whimpered and opened her dressing gown. She pushed aside the cream-colored pajama coat under it, and showed him her body below her left breast, white flesh crisscrossed with thin red lines, dotted with tiny red dots, where the pin had scratched and punctured it. To stay awake, walk till you came, she said you'd come, were so long. She swayed. Spade tightened his arm around her and said, Walk. She fought against his arm, squirming around to face him again. No. Tell you. Sleep. Save her. Bridget, he demanded. Yes. Took her. Burlingame. 26 Ancho. Hurry. Too late. Her head fell over on her shoulder. Spade pushed her head up roughly. Who took her there? Your father? Yes. Wilma. Cairo. She writhed and her eyelids twitched but did not open. Kill her. Her head fell over again and again he pushed it up. Who shot Jacoby? She did not seem to hear the question. She tried pitifully to hold her head up, to open her eyes. She mumbled, "Go, she." He shook her brutally. "Stay awake till the doctor comes." Fear opened her eyes and pushed for a moment the cloudiness from her face. "No, no," she cried thickly. "Father, kill me. Swear you won't. He'd know. I did for her. Promise won't. Sleep. All right. Morning." He shook her again. "You're sure you can sleep the stuff off all right?" "Yee." Her head fell down again. "Where's your bed?" She tried to raise a hand, but the effort had become too much for her before the hand pointed at anything except the carpet. With the sigh of a tired child, she let her whole body relax and crumple. Spade caught her up in his arms, scooped her up as she sank, and holding her easily against his chest, went to the nearest of the 3 doors. He turned the knob far enough to release the catch, pushed the door open with his foot, and went into a passageway that ran past an open bathroom door to a bedroom. He looked into the bathroom, saw it was empty, and carried the girl into the bedroom. Nobody was there. The clothing that was in sight and things on the chiffonier said it was a man's room. Spade carried the girl back to the green carpeted room and tried the opposite door. Through it he passed into another passageway, past another empty bathroom and into a bedroom that was feminine in its accessories. He turned back the bedclothes and laid the girl on the bed, removed her slippers, raised her a little to slide the yellow dressing gown off, fixed a pillow under her head, and put the covers up over her. Then he opened the room's 2 windows and stood with his back to them, staring at the sleeping girl. Her breathing was heavy but not troubled. He frowned and looked around, working his lips together. Twilight was dimming the room. He stood there in the weakening light for perhaps 5 minutes. Finally he shook his thick sloping shoulders impatiently and went out, leaving the suite's outer door unlocked. Spade went to the Pacific Telephone and Telegraph Company's station in Powell Street and called Davenport 2020. "Emergency hospital, please." "Hello, there's a girl in suite 12C at the Alexandria Hotel who has been drugged. Yes, you'd better send somebody to take a look at her. This is Mr. Hooper of the Alexandria." He put the receiver on its prong and laughed. He called another number and said, "Hello, Frank. This is Sam Spade. Can you let me have a car with a driver who'll keep his mouth shut, to go down the peninsula right away? Just a couple of hours. Right. Have him pick me up at John's, Ellis Street, as soon as he can make it." He called another number. His officers held the receiver to his ear for a little while without saying anything, and replaced it on its hook. He went to John's Grill, asked the waiter to hurry his order of chops, baked potato and sliced tomatoes, ate hurriedly, and was smoking a cigarette with his coffee when a thick-set youngish man with a plaid cap set askew above pale eyes and a tough, cheery face came into the grill and to his table. "All set, Mr. Spade. She's full of gas and rearing to go." "Swell." Spade emptied his cup and went out with the thick-set man. "Know where Ancho Avenue or Road or Boulevard is in Burlingame?" "Nope, but if she's there we can find her." "Let's do that," Spade said as he sat beside the chauffeur in the dark Cadillac sedan. 26 is the number we want, and the sooner the better, but we don't want to pull up at the front door." "Correct." They rode 6 blocks in silence. The chauffeur said, "Your partner got knocked off, didn't he, Mr. Spade?" "Uh-huh." The chauffeur clucked. "She's a tough racket. You can have it for mine." "Well, hack drivers don't live forever." "Maybe that's right," the thick-set man conceded. "But just the same, it'll always be a surprise to me if I don't." Spade stared ahead at nothing and thereafter, until the chauffeur, tired of making conversation, replied with uninterested yeses and nos. At a drugstore in Burlingame, the chauffeur learned how to reach Ancho Avenue. 10 minutes later, he stopped the sedan near a dark corner, turned off the lights, and waved his hand at the block ahead. "There she is," he said. "She ought to be on the other side, maybe the 3rd or 4th house." Spade said, "Right," and got out of the car. "Keep the engine going, we may have to leave in a hurry." He crossed the street and went up the other side. Far ahead a lone street light burned. Warmer lights dotted the night on either side where houses were spaced half a dozen to a block. A high, thin moon was cold and feeble as the distant streetlight. A radio droned through the open windows of a house on the other side of the street. In front of the second house from the corner, Spade halted. On one of the gate-posts that were massive out of all proportion to the fence flanking them, a 2 and a 6 of pale metal caught what light there was. A square white card was nailed over them. Putting his face close to the card, Spade could see that it was a for sale or rent sign. There was no gate between the posts. Spade went up the cement walk to the house. He stood still on the walk at the foot of the porch steps for a long moment. No sound came from the house. The house was dark except for another pale square card nailed on its door. Spade went up to the door and listened. He could hear nothing. He tried to look through the glass of the door. There was no curtain to keep his gaze out, but inner darkness. He tiptoed to a window and then to another. They, like the door, were uncurtained except by inner darkness. He tried both windows. They were locked. He tried the door. It was locked. He left the porch and, stepping carefully over dark, unfamiliar ground, walked through weeds around the house. The side windows were too high to be reached from the ground. The back door and the one back window he could reach were locked. Spade went back to the gate-post and, cupping the flame between his hands, held his lighter up to the for sale or rent sign. It bore the printed name and address of a San Mateo real estate dealer and a line penciled in blue, key at 31. Spade returned to the sedan and asked the chauffeur, "Got a flashlight?" "Sure." He gave it to Spade. "Can I give you a hand at anything?" "Maybe." Spade got into the sedan. "We'll ride up to number 31. You can use your lights." Number 31 was a square grey house across the street from, but a little farther up than 26. Lights glowed in its downstairs windows. Spade went up on the porch and rang the bell. A dark-haired girl of 14 or 15 opened the door. Spade, bowing and smiling, said, "I'd like to get the key to number 26. "I'll call Papa," she said, and went back into the house, calling, "Papa!" A plump, red-faced man, bald-headed and heavily mustached, appeared, carrying a newspaper. Spade said, "I'd like to get the key to 26. The plump man looked doubtful. He said, "The juice is not on. You couldn't see anything." Spade patted his pocket. "I've a flashlight." The plump man looked more doubtful. He cleared his throat uneasily and crumpled the newspaper in his hand. Spade showed him one of his business cards, put it back in his pocket and said in a low voice, "We got a tip that there might be something hidden there." The plump man's face and voice were eager. "Oh, wait a minute," he said. "I'll go over with you." A moment later he came back carrying a brass key attached to a black and red tag. Spade beckoned to the chauffeur as they passed the car, and the chauffeur joined them. "Anybody been looking at the house lately?" Spade asked. "Not that I know of," the plump man replied. "Nobody's been to me for the key in a couple of months." The plump man marched ahead with the key until they had gone up on the porch. Then he thrust the key into Spade's hand, mumbled, "Here you are," and stepped aside. Spade unlocked the door and pushed it open. There was silence and darkness. Holding the flashlight dark in his left hand, Spade entered. The chauffeur came close behind him, and then, at a little distance, the plump man followed them. They searched the house from bottom to top, cautiously at first, then, finding nothing, boldly. The house was empty unmistakably, and there was nothing to indicate that it had been visited in weeks. Saying, "Thanks, that's all," Spade left the sedan in front of the Alexandria. He went into the hotel, to the desk, where a tall young man with a dark, grave face said, "Good evening, Mr. Spade." "Good evening." Spade drew the young man to one end of the desk. "These Gutmans up in 12C, are they in?" The young man replied, "No," darting a quick glance at Spade. Then he looked away, hesitated, looked at Spade again, and murmured, "A funny thing happened in connection with them this evening, Mr. Spade. Somebody called the emergency hospital and told them there was a sick girl up there." "And there wasn't?" "Oh no, there was nobody up there. They went out earlier in the evening." Spade said, "Well, these practical jokers have to have their fun. Thanks." He went to a telephone booth, called a number and said, "Hello, Mrs. Perrine, is Effie there? Yes, please. Thanks. Hello, Angel. What's the good word? Fine, fine. Hold it. I'll be out in 20 minutes. Right. Half an hour later, Spade rang the doorbell of a 2-story brick building in 9th Avenue. Effie Perrine opened the door. Her boyish face was tired and smiling. Hello, boss, she said. Enter. She said in a low voice, If Ma says anything to you, Sam, be nice to her. She's all up in the air. Spade grinned reassuringly and patted her shoulder. She put her hands on his arm. Miss O'Shaughnessy? No, he growled. I ran into a plant. Are you sure it was her voice? Yes. He made an unpleasant face. Well, it was Huey. She took him into a bright living room, sighed, and slumped down on one end of a Chesterfield, smiling cheerfully up at him through her weariness. He sat beside her and asked, Everything went okay? Nothing said about the bundle? Nothing. I told them what you told me to tell them, and they seemed to take it for granted that the phone call had something to do with it and that you were out running it down. Dundee there? No. Hoffenagar and some others I didn't know. I talked to the captain too. They took you down to the hall? Oh, yes, and they asked me loads of questions, but it was all you know routine. Spade rubbed his palms together. Swell, he said, and then frowned. Though I guess they'll think up plenty to put to me when we meet. That damn Dundee will, anyway. And Brian. He moved his shoulders. Anybody you know, outside of the police, come around? Yes. She sat up straight. That boy, the one who brought the message from Gutman, was there. He didn't come in, but the police left the corridor door open while they were there, and I saw him standing there. You didn't say anything? Oh, no. You had said not to, so I didn't pay any attention to him, and the next time I looked he was gone. Spade grinned at her. Damned lucky for you, sister, that the coppers got there first. Why? He's a bad egg, that lad Poison. Was the dead man Jacoby? Yes. He pressed her hands and stood up. I'm going to run along. You'd better hit the hay. You're all in. She rose. Sam, what is... He stopped her words with his hand on her mouth. Save it till Monday, he said. I want to sneak out before your mother catches me and gives me hell for dragging her lamb through gutters. Midnight was a few minutes away when Spade reached his home. He put his key into the street door's lock. Heels clicked rapidly on the sidewalk behind him. He let go the key and wheeled. Bridget O'Shaughnessy ran up the steps to him. She put her arms around him and hung on him, panting, Oh, I thought you'd never come. Her face was haggard, distraught, shaken by the tremors that shook her from head to foot. With a hand not supporting her, he felt for the key again, opened the door, and half lifted her inside. You've been waiting? He asked. Yes. Panting spaced her words. In a doorway up the street. Can you make it all right? He asked. Or shall I carry you? She shook her head against his shoulder. I'll be all right when I get where I can sit down. They rode up to Spade's floor in the elevator and went around to his apartment. She left his arm and stood beside him, panting, both hands to her breast while he unlocked his door. He switched on the passageway light. They went in. He shut the door and, with his arm around her again, took her back towards the living room. When they were within a step of the living room door, the light in the living room went on. The girl cried out and clung to Spade. Just inside the living room door, Fat Gutman stood smiling benevolently at them. The boy Wilmer came out of the kitchen behind them. Black pistols were gigantic in his small hands. Cairo came from the bathroom. He too had a pistol. Gutman said, Well, sir, we're all here, as you can see for yourself. Now let's come in and sit down and be comfortable and talk.